It was a quiet morning at the airport. The usual buzz of travelers, people rushing to catch flights, children dragging suitcases, business people checking their phones filled the terminals. But for one airline employee, this day was unlike any other. He had been given a very special assignment, one that carried a weight heavier than any luggage he had ever handled. He was to escort the body of a fallen soldier back home. This soldier had given his life while serving his country. And now it was the solemn duty of the airline and this employee to make sure he returned with respect and honor. The soldier's coffin was draped with the national flag, its colors bright but quiet under the soft fluorescent lights of the airport. The sight of it immediately drew attention. People stopped what they were doing to look. Some lowered their heads in silent respect. Some whispered prayers, and some couldn't hide the tears forming in their eyes. Even strangers who had never met the soldier felt the weight of his sacrifice. The employee, standing tall beside the coffin, felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride that he could play a role in honoring this hero. Sadness because he knew that no words or ceremonies could ever fully repay the soldier for the life he had given. As he prepared to move the coffin through the terminal, he checked every detail carefully. The straps were secure, the flag was perfectly straight, and everything was ready for the journey. He could hear the soft hum of airport announcements in the background. Blending with the distant rolling of suitcases on tile floors, passengers passing by glanced at him and the coffin. Some looked away, unable to face the reality of death, while others paused, their eyes fixed on the symbol of bravery before them. The employee's mind wandered for a moment. He thought about the soldier's life, the missions he must have been on, the challenges he faced, and the people he left behind. He imagined the soldier's family, waiting at home, unaware of the exact moment when they would see him one last time. The thought tightened his chest. He knew that this escort was more than a task. It was a responsibility to every person who had loved and cared for this fallen hero. Every careful step he took with the coffin was a step of honor. It's a silent promise that the soldier's sacrifice would not go unnoticed. People around the terminal started to notice something unusual. Most travelers were caught up in their own busy schedules, but a few began to follow quietly, drawn by the solemnity of the moment. Phones came out to capture the scene, though no one made a sound. Some elderly passengers quietly whispered, "God bless him," while younger travelers looked in silent amazement. It was rare to witness something so serious in the middle of an airport, a place usually filled with chatter and announcements about delayed flights and gate changes. The employee felt the eyes of strangers on him, but he didn't let it distract him. He kept his focus on the coffin, walking steadily, step by step. Each step felt heavier than the last, because he knew the eyes of the public, more importantly, the weight of duty, were upon him. Every movement had to be precise. Every gesture had to reflect respect. It wasn't just a coffin he was escorting. It was a symbol of courage, bravery, and ultimate sacrifice. He remembered the stories he had heard about soldiers who gave their lives for the country. Families losing loved ones, friends mourning comrades, communities grieving silently. All the stories came to his mind. He realized that what he was doing was not just a job. It was a connection between the past and the present. A bridge between the soldier who had served and the people who still remembered him. The terminal seemed to quiet down in those moments, as if the very walls recognized the importance of this journey. As he reached the boarding area, he noticed airport staff pausing in their work. Even the usual rush of employees handling luggage, checking tickets, and guiding passengers seemed to slow down. Everyone around him sensed the solemnity of the task. A few passengers stopped walking and stood still, a small gesture, yet powerful. Some even removed their hats in respect. The flag on the coffin seemed to ripple slightly with the air conditioning, catching the light in a way that made the colors glow softly. Almost like a silent tribute, the employee's mind wandered to the soldier's life again. He wondered about the soldier's dreams, what he wanted to achieve, and the little moments that brought joy, a laugh with friends, a family dinner, or perhaps a quiet night under the stars. Now, all those moments had ended, and what remained was honor and memory. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just to the airline or the rules of escorting, but to the memory of the soldier himself. Every careful movement of the coffin was a way of showing gratitude, a way of saying, "We remember you, we honor you." The atmosphere in the terminal was unusual. Normally, airports were filled with announcements, loud conversations, and people hurrying to catch flights. But today, there was a pause. Even the background noise seemed muted, as if everyone subconsciously understood that a moment of history and respect was unfolding before them. It was a quiet acknowledgement that some sacrifices deserved more than routine acknowledgement. They deserved reverence. As the escort continued walking, he noticed small gestures from strangers. Some passengers offered a nod. Some held their hands together quietly, as if in prayer. A young child looked up with wide eyes, sensing the seriousness of the moment without fully understanding it. It was a reminder to the employee that the impact of bravery and sacrifice extended far beyond the battlefield, did touch the hearts of ordinary people. Strangers who might never meet the soldier, but still felt connected to his courage. With each step, he felt a mix of pride, sorrow, and determination. This was more than a journey to board a plane. It was a journey of respect, of human connection, of remembering what truly mattered. He walked steadily, never rushing, understanding that this slow, careful pace was itself a tribute. Every step was an unspoken message. We honor you. We will not forget. Even as the boarding time approached and the bustle of passengers grew closer, he kept his composure. He knew that the real challenge was still ahead. But he also knew that this first part of the journey, the walk through the terminal, the attention of strangers, the quiet moments of respect, was already a powerful statement. It was a reminder that sometimes, even in the busiest, noisiest places, the most important moments can unfold in silence. In that quiet walk, the airline employee and the fallen soldier shared a bond, one that words could not capture. The soldier, though gone, was honored through each careful step. The employee, though just doing his duty, carried a weight of history, gratitude, sorrow that would stay with him forever. And the passengers who witnessed it, Evan, for a brief moment, felt something deep inside. A mix of respect, humility, and admiration. This was the beginning of a story that would later spark conversations, outrage, and eventually change. But in that moment, it was simply about one man escorting a hero. With the world quietly watching and acknowledging the bravery that should never be forgotten, the escort had carefully guided the coffin of the fallen soldier through the terminal. And for a moment, everything had seemed to be going perfectly. The passengers had watched in silence, and the solemnity of the scene had seemed to flow naturally. But as he approached the boarding gate, the air changed. Suddenly, he was stopped by airline staff who gave him a look of hesitation. One of the gate agents, clipboard in hand, spoke quickly and politely, but with a tone that carried a hint of discomfort. "I'm sorry, sir, but the coffin can't board this flight as scheduled." The escort's heart skipped a beat. He had prepared for every detail, confirmed every arrangement. And yet now he was being told that the plan would not proceed. "Why?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm, though inside he felt a surge of confusion and frustration. The gate agent offered several explanations. There was supposedly not enough space on the plane. There were policy restrictions and paperwork delays. Each reason seemed more absurd than the last. The escort tried to argue, explaining that this was not ordinary cargo. It was a fallen soldier returning home with honor. The agent nodded politely, but insisted that the rules could not be broken. Passengers nearby began to notice the unusual scene. Some glanced over curiously, trying to understand why a flag-draped coffin was being held up. The escort could feel the weight of their attention. The soldier, who had sacrificed everything for his country, was now being treated as a logistical problem rather than a hero. It was as if the very dignity of his sacrifice was being questioned. The escort felt anger rise in him, not anger at the gate agent, who was only doing her job, but at the situation itself, which seemed so unfair and shocking. A few passengers started whispering to one another. "Is this really happening?" One woman asked her friend, "Why would they stop a fallen soldier from boarding?" Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene discreetly. The escort noticed this and hesitated for a moment, thinking about how this footage could spread. But deep down, he knew the world needed to see this, to understand how even a hero could be treated as ordinary cargo. The agent continued to explain, repeating the same points over and over. The escort listened carefully, but it was clear that there was no immediate solution. He began to think about the soldier's family, how they must have been preparing for this moment, expecting to finally have their loved one return with respect. The thought tightened his chest. He imagined the mother, the father, the siblings, maybe a spouse or children, waiting somewhere, unaware of the chaos unfolding in the airport. How would they feel knowing their hero was being delayed, held up by bureaucratic rules and airline policies? The escort tried to reason calmly, explaining that the soldier deserved honor, respect, and a dignified journey home. He reminded the agent that the coffin was draped in the national flag, symbolizing the soldier's service and sacrifice. But the agent could only repeat that the flight was full and policies were strict. Each word felt like a punch to the chest. The escort wanted to shout to demand justice, but he restrained himself. He knew that losing his composure would not help. It could make the situation worse. So he took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and continued to insist politely, hoping someone higher up could intervene. Meanwhile, other passengers were beginning to react. Some were visibly angry. One man stepped forward and asked, "You're telling me a soldier who gave his life for this country can't be on this flight? Are you serious?" Another woman shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. The scene started drawing more attention. People stopped walking, stopped checking their phones, and just stared. There was a shared sense of outrage, an unspoken understanding that what was happening was wrong. The escort noticed a few passengers quietly murmuring prayers or bowing their heads in respect. They seemed to be offering silent support, acknowledging the fallen soldier's sacrifice even as the airline faltered. The situation began to feel surreal. The escort had thought that all the hard work, all the careful planning, and all the respect would ensure a smooth process. But now, faced with policy and delay, it felt like the soldier was being treated as if he were just another piece of luggage. Every moment of waiting seemed longer than the last. The escort felt his stomach tighten, a mixture of frustration, sadness, and determination building inside him. He couldn't let this dishonor happen, not here, not in front of the public, not ever. He looked around for support. A few airport employees nearby were sympathetic, offering quiet words or small gestures of encouragement. Some passengers whispered, "It's not fair," or "He should be on that plane." The escort felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps if enough people voiced their concern, someone in authority would step in. But even with these glimmers of hope, the sense of helplessness was heavy. The soldier's dignity was at stake, and no one could afford to make a mistake in such a sensitive moment. As the minutes passed, the escort tried to remain calm. He adjusted the straps on the coffin, making sure it was secure, and walked slowly, ensuring that the soldier's body was treated with the utmost care. He spoke softly to the fallen soldier, a quiet, almost instinctive gesture. "I'm here. I won't let this dishonor happen." Though the soldier could not respond, the act of speaking seemed to strengthen the escort's resolve. He was no longer just following orders. He was protecting the honor of someone who had given everything for his country. Suddenly, one passenger, unable to contain their shock, took out a phone and began recording. At first, the escort hesitated, worried about privacy and protocol. But then he realized that this might be exactly what the world needed to see. The footage captured the tension, the disbelief, and the sheer unfairness of the situation. Soon, other passengers joined in, some filming discreetly, some openly showing their anger. The terminal, once filled with routine chatter and flight announcements, was now charged with an unusual energy, a mix of anger, respect, and the need for justice. The escort felt a mixture of relief and worry. Relief, because the attention might finally lead to action. Worry, because public exposure could also escalate tensions and complicate matters further. Yet he knew one thing for certain. He could not allow the fallen soldier to be delayed without protest. Each passing second felt like an insult to the soldier's sacrifice, and he was determined to protect his honor until the very end. In that tense moment, the airline staff continued to insist that rules were rules. while the escort continued to insist that respect and honor for a fallen hero were not optional. Passengers whispered to each other, some expressing outrage, some sharing their disbelief. Everyone present could feel the weight of the situation, the collision between policy and humanity, rules and sacrifice. And through it all, the escort remained steady, walking beside the soldier's coffin with a quiet dignity that inspired those around him. It was clear that this day would not end quietly. Something extraordinary was unfolding in the airport terminal, something that would soon attract attention far beyond the gates. The escort, aware of the growing scrutiny, braced himself for what would come next. He had not anticipated the battle with bureaucracy, but he knew he could not step back. The fallen soldier deserved better than delays, excuses, or confusion. He deserved honor, respect, and the dignity of a proper journey home. And so, standing beside the coffin, facing the confusion and resistance from the airline, and surrounded by passengers who were now silently rallying behind him, the escort prepared for the next step. He knew this moment, this confrontation would change everything. It was no longer just a duty. It had become a stand for what was right. What happened next would shock him, the passengers, and eventually the entire nation. The airport terminal had never felt so tense. What started as a quiet escort of a fallen soldier had now transformed into a scene that drew attention from everyone nearby. Passengers whispered to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others recording the events with their phones. The escort stood beside the flag-draped coffin, his face calm, but his mind racing. He had never imagined that a simple act of duty bringing a soldier home with honor would become a public spectacle. Yet here he was, facing confusion, rules, a growing sense of outrage among the crowd. As the minutes passed, the first video appeared online. A passenger had recorded the gate agent explaining, in a calm but frustratingly rigid tone, that the soldier's coffin could not board the flight. The clip showed the escort politely arguing, the somber passengers around them, the coffin standing silently as if waiting for justice. Within moments of being posted, the video began to circulate. At first, only a few friends and family members saw it, sharing it with messages like, "Can you believe this?" and "This is unbelievable." But soon, it began spreading at a much faster pace. People across the city, and eventually the country, started reacting. The public reaction was immediate and powerful. Social media exploded with messages of anger and disbelief. Veterans and military families were among the first to voice their outrage. They could not understand how a fallen soldier, someone who had given his life for the nation, could be treated as though he were just a piece of cargo. Ordinary citizens joined in, sharing posts, writing comments, and expressing their disappointment. Hashtags appeared, urging people to demand answers. News outlets began picking up the story as clips from the airport circulated widely. The escort felt a mixture of emotions. He was relieved that the world was finally seeing what he had experienced firsthand, but he also felt the pressure intensify. His role, which had initially been private and solemn, was now under the scrutiny of millions of eyes. Every movement he made, every gesture of respect toward the coffin, was being observed. Despite this, he remained focused. He could not let the growing attention distract him from his primary duty, ensuring that the soldier was treated with honor. Journalists began reaching out, calling the airline and requesting interviews. The escort, still on the spot, found himself speaking carefully to explain what had occurred. He described the confusion at the gate, the rigid insistence of policy over compassion, and the emotional weight of escorting a fallen hero. He emphasized that this was not about a delay or inconvenience. It was about respect for someone who had made the ultimate sacrifice. His words resonated with the public, further amplifying the outrage. Meanwhile, the airline tried to issue a statement. Their first response, carefully written and cautious, only seemed to make people angrier. They explained that all airline rules and procedures had been followed, emphasizing logistics and scheduling as reasons for the delay. But the public, having seen the video, did not accept this explanation. People compared policy to humanity and concluded that no rule should ever take priority over honoring a soldier who had given his life. The online conversation intensified. People shared personal stories of family members who served in the military, stories of grief, sacrifice, and the importance of dignity. Veterans groups quickly organized statements condemning the airline's actions. They called for accountability and demanded that the fallen soldier be immediately allowed to board the flight. Social media posts tagged government officials, military leaders, and news organizations, making sure the story could not be ignored. What had started as a small incident in one airport terminal had become a national discussion about respect, honor, and the responsibilities of institutions toward those who serve. The escort, meanwhile, was both amazed and overwhelmed by the support. Passengers who had been silent moments before now approached him, expressing gratitude for his calmness and dignity. Some offered words of encouragement, saying, "Thank you for standing up," or "You're doing the right thing." Others offered help in small ways, whether by offering to call higher authorities, posting about the situation, or just silently standing by as witnesses. The atmosphere, which had started as confusion and tension, now carried a strange mix of solidarity and hope. People were rallying around the idea that a hero deserved respect, the family of the fallen soldier, once informed of the situation, experienced a mixture of worry and relief. They were initially anxious, unsure of what had gone wrong and whether the soldier would be brought home with honor. But as social media coverage and news reports reached them, they realized that the public attention might force a resolution. Their emotions were sorrow for their loss, gratitude for the escort, and anger at the unnecessary delay. Yet, in the growing wave of support, they felt a sense of hope that their loved one's sacrifice would not be forgotten or disrespected. As the day progressed, the story began to dominate headlines. Newspapers, websites, and television programs all covered the incident. The focus was not just on the escort or the airline, but on the broader issue of respect for fallen soldiers. Editorials demanded accountability, emphasizing that no airline policy should ever outweigh the duty to honor those who serve. Opinion pieces reminded the public that heroes are not only made on the battlefield, they are remembered in the way institutions and individuals treat their memory afterward. The escort, though still at the airport, was now part of a story that had captured national attention. He realized that his quiet act of duty had unexpectedly become a symbol. People were watching how he handled the situation, how he maintained dignity in the face of bureaucracy, and how he ensured the soldier's honor remained intact despite challenges. He felt a mixture of pride and pressure. Pride that he had remained composed, that he had stood for respect. Pressure because now millions of people were waiting to see how the situation would resolve. Amid the chaos, the escort continued his careful movements around the coffin, adjusting straps and ensuring that it remained stable. He spoke softly, almost as if comforting the fallen soldier, acknowledging the absurdity of the situation, while also reaffirming his commitment to honor and duty. This quiet reverence, contrasted with the loud outrage online and in the terminal, created a striking image. People watching the video and those at the airport both saw that, even in confusion and frustration, respect could prevail. The airline, now fully aware of the public outrage, scrambled to respond. Internal discussions and emergency meetings began as executives realized the severity of the situation. What had been a routine flight now carried the weight of national attention. Social media users, veterans organizations, and news outlets demanded action. And the company knew that delaying the soldier further could irreparably damage its reputation. The escort, though only a small part of the larger organization, found himself in the middle of a moment that would later be remembered as an example of public accountability. By the end of the day, it was clear that this incident was far from ordinary. The escort had remained calm, focused, and respectful, while the airline faced mounting pressure. The fallen soldier, who could no longer speak for himself, had found a voice through the dedication of the escort and the outrage of the public. What had begun as a tense moment at a boarding gate had grown into a powerful statement about honor, sacrifice, and the responsibilities of institutions to treat heroes with dignity. Through it all, the escort understood that the journey was not just about moving a coffin from one place to another. It was about holding on to humanity in a moment where bureaucracy had threatened to overshadow respect. It was about ensuring that a life given in service of others was recognized, remembered, and honored. The story, captured in videos, news reports, and social media posts, would go on to spark debates, outrage, and eventually change. But for the escort, it was simply about doing the right thing. Even when the world watched, and even when rules seemed to stand in the way of justice. The outrage over the fallen soldiers' delayed flight had now reached a fever pitch. The story, which started in the quiet corners of an airport terminal, had exploded across social media, news channels, and national conversations. People everywhere were demanding answers. Veterans organizations issued statements, citizens posted heartfelt messages online, and journalists flooded the airline with questions. What had been a private moment of duty had now turned into a public crisis. Inside the airline, panic and urgency replaced routine operations. Executives realized that this situation could not be ignored or brushed aside. The airline's leadership called emergency meetings. They pored over policies, flight schedules, and regulations. But it became clear that the rules were no longer the main issue. The public was watching, and the perception of disrespect toward a fallen hero had already caused immense damage. Employees who normally handled flights and boarding were now suddenly part of a national debate on honor, morality, and accountability. The situation had escalated beyond their control, and they understood that every decision they made from this point onward would be scrutinized. Meanwhile, the escort continued to stand by the coffin, silently ensuring that the soldier was treated with the dignity he deserved. He was no longer alone in his responsibility. Passengers who had earlier stopped to watch in disbelief now stayed around him in quiet support. Some offered encouraging words while others simply nodded in solidarity. The atmosphere in the terminal had shifted from shock to a shared sense of justice. People were united in their belief that the fallen soldier's journey home must be honored, no matter what obstacles arose. As the airline struggled to respond, more information began to emerge. Former employees and military officials spoke publicly, pointing out that special protocols existed for transporting fallen soldiers. These protocols were designed to ensure respect, honor, and dignity, exactly what had been missing in this situation. News reports highlighted that the soldiers' delay was not only unnecessary, but avoidable if the airline had followed the proper procedures. Public anger intensified as people realized that this was not just an accident, it was a failure of the system. Citizens demanded accountability, calling for changes to prevent similar incidents in the future. Protests began outside the airline's offices in major cities. Veterans, military families, and ordinary citizens gathered, holding flags, banners, and photos of soldiers. Their chants and signs demanded justice for the fallen soldier. Social media posts documented the growing crowds, making it impossible for the airline to ignore the public outcry. The escort, still at the airport, received messages of support from people across the country. He felt a mixture of pride and pressure. He had not asked for recognition, but he now realized that his calm and respectful actions had inspired others. People saw him as a symbol of standing up for what was right. Even when bureaucracy and policy seemed to get in the way, inside the airline, executives debated how to respond. They had tried issuing statements earlier, but those had only inflamed the situation. Now, they faced a crucial decision: act quickly to correct the mistake, or risk further damage to their reputation. The scale of the public reaction had grown beyond anything they anticipated. Sponsors and partners started voicing concern, questioning how such a situation could occur in a company that prided itself on professionalism. The executives realized that immediate action was necessary not only to honor the soldier but to restore public trust. The escort, observing the developments around him, stayed focused on the coffin. He adjusted the straps, ensured that the flag remained perfectly draped, and quietly reassured himself that he was doing everything possible to protect the soldier's dignity. He reflected on the meaning of sacrifice and honor. This was more than a symbolic duty. It was a moral responsibility. He could not allow policies, paperwork, or logistics to overshadow respect for someone who had given their life in service of the country. His presence had become a living reminder that respect and humanity must come first, even in the face of rules and bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the public's attention continued to grow. Veterans groups contacted government officials, urging them to intervene. News anchors and journalists covered every detail, replaying videos of the escort standing by the coffin, calmly insisting that the soldier be allowed to board. Online forums were filled with discussions about honor, patriotism, and the importance of treating fallen soldiers with dignity. People compared the incident to other moments of respect for military service, noting how rare it was to see someone so devoted to maintaining the proper tribute in the face of indifference. Eventually, the airline's leadership realized that a private solution would no longer be enough. They needed a public acknowledgement, an apology, and a clear plan to ensure the soldier could be escorted home with full honor. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings continued as executives drafted statements, coordinated with flight crews, and confirmed logistics. They understood that the world was watching, and every detail mattered. Any further mistakes could escalate the outrage and irreparably harm the company's reputation. Back at the airport, the escort remained composed. Passengers continued to support him in small ways, offering silent gestures of respect. Some elderly veterans quietly stood near the coffin, their hands clasped together in reflection. Families whispered prayers while children looked on, sensing the seriousness of the moment, even without fully understanding it. The escort felt the weight of the soldier's story, of the family waiting somewhere, and of the countless people now watching through social media. This was no longer just a duty. It was a responsibility shared by everyone present. The growing public pressure forced the airline to act quickly. Plans were made to move the coffin onto a later flight, with full coordination and respect for military protocols. Employees were briefed on the importance of the escort, the dignity of the soldier, and the need for every step to be executed flawlessly. The escort was reassured that the soldier would finally receive the honor he deserved. Relief mixed with exhaustion, knowing that the struggle to maintain respect was not yet over, but that the outcome was finally moving in the right direction. By the end of the day, it was clear that the incident had sparked more than just outrage. It had inspired a conversation about honor, respect, and the treatment of those who serve. The escort, once a quiet figure performing a solemn duty, had become a symbol of integrity and moral courage. The fallen soldier, who could no longer speak for himself, had found a voice through the courage of the escort and the collective outrage of the public. The incident reminded everyone that sometimes standing up for what is right requires calm, determination, and unwavering respect, even when faced with obstacles and bureaucracy. As night fell, the airport slowly returned to its usual pace, but the story continued to grow. News outlets ran features, social media posts went viral, and people shared their thoughts and support for the escort and the soldier. Behind the scenes, the airline worked tirelessly to ensure the coffin would be moved with honor the next day. The escort remained vigilant, knowing that every detail mattered, and understanding that this journey was about more than transportation. It was about paying tribute to a life given in service to others. The events of the day served as a powerful lesson. Respect for those who sacrifice for their country must come before rules, policies, or convenience. The escort's dedication, combined with the public's refusal to accept disrespect, had forced change. The soldier's family, though still grieving, felt a sense of comfort knowing that the world had witnessed their loved one's bravery and that honor had been restored. The incident, now etched into public memory, would serve as a reminder that dignity, courage, and humanity can prevail, even in the most bureaucratic and challenging circumstances. The following day, the airport was filled with a tense sense of anticipation. After the outrage, the protests, and the endless debates, everyone involved knew that this flight would finally become more than just a journey. It would be a moment of honor, respect, and closure. The escort arrived early as he had the day before, but this time the atmosphere felt different. There was a sense of purpose and determination in the air, not only from him but from the airline staff, who had now been fully briefed on the importance of the flight. Every detail had been double-checked, every protocol followed, and every employee instructed on the importance of dignity for the fallen soldier. The flag-draped coffin rested quietly in the terminal, still glowing with the bright colors of the national emblem. Passengers, now aware of the situation, and many following the story in the news, watched silently. The mood was respectful and solemn. People lowered their heads, removed their hats, or whispered prayers. There was a shared understanding that what was happening was not ordinary, that this moment carried significance far beyond the airport walls. Even those who had come only to catch a flight paused, sensing the importance of witnessing respect being properly paid to a hero. The escort carefully adjusted the straps on the coffin, ensuring everything was in perfect order. He checked the flag, smoothing it so that it rested neatly and respectfully across the top. He looked around at the passengers and staff, feeling a mix of relief and focus. Relief that at last the fallen soldier's dignity would be honored. Focus because he knew that this final part of the journey required complete attention and respect. There could be no errors, no oversights, no distractions. The soldier's family, waiting somewhere far away, deserved nothing less than perfection in this final tribute. Airline employees, who had previously been rigid and unsure, now moved with purpose and care. Ground staff coordinated efficiently, understanding the unique significance of the task at hand. Even the gate agents, who had caused confusion the day before, now worked quietly but attentively, escorting the coffin toward the aircraft with respect. It was as if the outrage and public attention had shifted the mindset of everyone involved. What had been a bureaucratic obstacle was now a mission of honor. The escort walked alongside, ensuring that every step maintained dignity. As the coffin was carefully moved toward the aircraft, passengers and airport staff alike stood in silence. Some bowed their heads, some clasped their hands, and some simply watched in awe. The quiet was punctuated only by the soft rolling of the coffin on its dolly, the careful footsteps of the escort, and the hushed whispers of respect. Every movement carried weight. Each small gesture, a nod, a bowed head, a hand over a heart, became part of the tribute. The escort, fully aware of the symbolic importance, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had stood by the soldier through confusion, frustration, and national attention. And now, finally, he could ensure the hero's dignity was restored. The public, who had followed the story closely, were watching online as the video feed from the airport captured the solemn procession. People shared messages of gratitude and relief, praising the escort and the airline staff for finally doing the right thing. The story that had sparked outrage now began to inspire hope. It reminded everyone that even in the face of mistakes, injustice, and bureaucracy, respect and honor could prevail if people insisted on it. The escort's calm determination had become a symbol of moral courage, inspiring countless others to stand up for what is right in their own lives. Inside the aircraft, the crew prepared a special area for the fallen soldier. Seats were cleared, pathways kept open, and a quiet, respectful space was arranged to ensure the coffin could be moved safely and with dignity. The escort guided the coffin on board carefully, coordinating with the flight attendants who now understood the emotional and symbolic importance of the task. Every movement was deliberate and careful, showing reverence at every step. The plane, normally a place of routine boarding and luggage handling, had been transformed into a moving chamber of honor for someone who had given everything for his country. As the coffin was secured, the escort took a moment to step back and reflect. He thought about the soldier's life, the sacrifices made, and the family waiting anxiously. He also thought about the public outrage and support, the way ordinary people had come together to demand justice, and how this collective voice had finally brought about change. He realized that this journey was no longer just about him or the airline, it was about society, remembering to value and honor those who serve. The escort's role, small at first, had become monumental. His dedication had ensured that the soldier's story would be remembered with dignity. The family of the fallen soldier, watching updates and news reports, felt a mixture of grief and relief. Their sorrow was still deep, but now it was coupled with comfort. They knew that their loved one was being returned home with the honor he deserved. The escort had kept his promise silently, ensuring that every step of the journey respected the sacrifice made. The family's pride in the soldier's service was mirrored in the dedication of the escort, the quiet respect shown by countless strangers who witnessed the scene. As the plane began its journey, the escort remained on board, overseeing the final moments of the soldier's return. Passengers who had seats nearby were quiet, understanding the importance of maintaining a respectful environment. Flight attendants moved discreetly, ensuring that the coffin was stable and treated with care. The atmosphere was unlike any other flight. The usual noise, chatter, and announcements had been replaced with a calm, reverent silence. Everyone on board felt the weight of the moment, acknowledging that this was not just a flight, but a tribute to a life given in service of others. By the time the plane landed at its destination, the fallen soldier was finally ready to be greeted by his family and community. Local authorities, veterans, and well-wishers had assembled to ensure a solemn and honorable welcome. The escort, who had guided the soldier from the beginning, now watched as the coffin was carried carefully from the plane. Every person present understood the significance of this moment. The public outrage had been transformed into public respect, and the long journey of bureaucracy, frustration, and attention had culminated in a ceremony of honor that the fallen soldier truly deserved. The escort felt a deep sense of accomplishment and relief. His dedication, patience, and moral courage had ensured that the soldier's dignity was preserved. He had witnessed how ordinary people, when outraged by injustice, could come together to demand change. He had seen how bureaucracy, when confronted by moral responsibility, could be guided toward the right action. And he had learned the profound lesson that respect, honor, and humanity are values that must be defended. Even when it seems inconvenient or difficult, the story quickly became a symbol of how society should treat its heroes. News outlets ran detailed reports showing the escort, the careful boarding, and the respectful handling of the coffin. Social media celebrated the escort's calm determination and the public's insistence on honoring the fallen soldier. Veterans and military families shared their pride and gratitude. Ordinary citizens reflected on the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for what is right. The fallen soldier, though silent, had achieved a lasting legacy through the actions of those who refused to allow disrespect. As the day ended, the escort quietly stepped back, observing the family and community paying their respects. Tears were shed, prayers were whispered, and stories were shared about the soldier's life and bravery. The escort knew that his role was done. The soldier had returned home with dignity, honor had been restored, and the public had witnessed the power of respect and moral courage. What had begun as a routine escort had grown into a lesson for the nation, showing that even in the face of obstacles, humanity and respect could triumph. The escort left the scene with a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had been part of something far greater than himself, a story that would inspire people to honor those who sacrifice for others. The fallen soldier's journey, which had sparked outrage, had now become a symbol of hope, respect, and justice. It reminded everyone that dignity and honor are never outdated values, and that standing up for what is right can change hearts, institutions, and even the course of history.